Hello guys, welcome back to the I Rise with the Sun podcast. My name is Yami. I'm super excited to be here and talk to you guys about what my topic is today. It's been a minute. I have been really busy working, and I actually had a few engagements and events kind of happening all at once. For example, I had a conference to go to in Texas. I had a women's retreat, both at which I spoke at, which was an amazing experience. And I'm so grateful, and I'm just so full of joy because of it. You guys rock. If you're listening to this today, thank you. I'm very happy that you're here. I'm happy that you saw the title, that you clicked on this video, that you are alive. I thank you that you are here and ready to go. God is not done with you yet. He's ready to start a new work in your life. He's ready to empower you. He's ready to give you your purpose and your calling, and just walk in that, walk in his obedience, walk in his faith. We're not here on this earth to be clinically depressed. And I say that because when I came up with the title to this podcast, I was clinically depressed and having suicidal ideations and all this other stuff. And at the end of the day, like, God did not create me. God did not create me to worry. Sorry, I had to do it. I have to do it. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for believing in me. If you're here, I know there's 1,001 podcasts you can listen to, but the fact that you've chosen to listen to this one just fills my heart with joy. Yeah. But this story, I think, is one of those stories where it's a classic. It's one of the ones that if you're a woman and you have read the Bible, you have probably read Esther. It's a quick read. I read the whole thing yesterday. Was it yesterday? No, I read the whole thing on Thursday. And it took me about less than an hour, probably about 15 minutes. 50, not 15. I decided to put on the VeggieTale version of it as I was reading it. And it was funny because the version of the VeggieTale story that I read, that I watched, it kind of aligned perfectly with what I was reading. So it was good. It was good. And I wasn't really focusing on the movie too much because I was reading most of the time, but, it's a wonderful read. It's a wonderful book. There's a lot of things in there that are just, wow, amazing. It's so juicy. It's like a telenovela in there, like in the best way possible. I want to kind of give you, if you have not read, okay, let me give you my little spiel. If you have not read Esther, then this is your time to read Esther. If you physically cannot actually read Esther at this very moment, maybe you don't have a Bible, there's the Bible app that you can download. I can sit here and say, well, it's okay. Don't read the Bible, because I can give you a synopsis of what went on, and you don't have to actually, whip out your Bible and read it. But I would be doing you a disservice. I'm not here to baby you or spoon feed you. I'm here to challenge you and to uplift you. And I believe that now is the time to put on your big girl pants and start doing the hard work. Get your butt up and work. I'm sorry, thinking about Kim Kardashian. I'm sorry. It's a complete story, and it's like a short story. It's not that long. If you're not a reader, I get it. I understand. Maybe have the Bible app has an option where you can have them read it to you. Like, it'll just be like a voice that reads it to you. And I think that might be the best way to go in that scenario. But I hope that you wouldn't take my word for it. I hope that you would always go back to your word and read up on what it actually says. And this is because people take their own context from it. And a lot of the times it can mean something different depending on who speaks about it, but then can mean something entirely different depending on the actual context of the Bible. So let me know if you have not read Esther and I have challenged you to read it today. Please comment down below when you finish reading it. Let me know if you've actually gone down that rabbit hole of reading the Bible, and I promise you won't be disappointed. Okay, so I want to give you a little quick summary. If you haven't read it already, let me give you a quick summary. And if you have read it already, here's the summary. You already know what happens. You can skip a little forward in the video if you'd like, but we all could use a refresher. There's a few characters in this Bible story that I can kind of talk to you about before we dive in so that you don't get confused. So there's Esther, of course. And now Esther is she starts off as a regular girl. So she's just a regular girl living her life, doing what she has to do. She does not have parents. She's living with her uncle. Her uncle's name is Mordecai. Now, Mordecai and Esther are, I would say, the two main characters of this book, and I would even go as far as to say that Mordecai is such an important role in this entire book that it should almost be called Esther and Mordecai and not just Esther. But hey, we got to give the queen her props, and we love that whole book is named after her. But Mordecai is essentially a man who is in the Jewish authority realm. So, for example, he's like an officer for the Jewish people. He is not an officer in command of the entire nation, but he is in charge of some aspect of the Jewish people. Haman is the villain. We don't like him. We don't like Haman. And then the king, who in some translations he's called Xerxes, and in some translation he has a different name, but I'm not remembering it at the moment. But to set the stage, they're in Persia, right? So think of Persia back in the day. So that's where they are. This is after the Babylonian Empire kind of overtook the Israelites. So they're in exile. They're not necessarily living their best life or anything. They would be considered a minority during this time. And you'll see a lot of different examples of what you could almost call racism and hatred towards the Jewish people as you read the story of Esther. And it all leads up to a moment of liberation at the end. So it's definitely one of those stories. Another person that's in this, I almost called it a movie, in this book, her name is Vashti. She was the king's ex-wife, and now she did something that made him so upset that he, decided to throw her out of the kingdom. So let's kind of go into that. That's where the book starts off. Now, the king is a pushover. Okay. This guy does not have a spine. Okay. Anything that is told to him, he just says, okay, all right, let's do that. He doesn't really think about what he's going to do. He doesn't really process very much. He's very much a say it and I'll do it type of guy. I mean, and he's a prideful man also, because listen, at the beginning of this book, he's having an entire celebration just to celebrate him. And it's going on for like 300 and something days. Like, this man is literally celebrating his greatness and his achievements and his this and his that. And during the same time, his wife Vashti is planning like a women's gathering where they're all together and they're all having fun as well. And he calls her into her courts and says, hey, I want you to show off your beauty. And it says in the Bible that he asks her to wear her crown and kind of just show herself off. I'm not sure if this implies anything else, so I'm really not going to touch on that. But from what it just says, it's like she's wearing a crown, she's going in there and she's showing off her beauty, and that's that. Now, Vashti's like, no, thank you. Not for me. I have like my girls to attend to. I'm not going to go over there and parade myself around just so a bunch of guys can drool over me. Like, absolutely not. So essentially all the men that were at the king's banquet were like, you gonna let her do that? You gonna let her talk to you like that? Really? Okay, so you just let women walk all over you. You're just gonna let your wife do this, and that, da 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 da. And he's like, oh no, she can't talk to me like that. So, just like I mentioned earlier, because he's a pushover, he decides that he's gonna make this decree where the men are in charge of their women. Like, for example, the men literally says, let me go in here and actually read it word for word. I can't find it right now, but it essentially says that the men will be masters of their wives, and kind of gives more authority to the husband and less authority to the women. So okay, we're setting the stage here. So now we know that the king is now at a place where he has put himself above women on a public. Because of this, he decides, again, with just the coercion and whatnot of his banquet guests, he decides that he's gonna actually look for a new queen, because since this queen did not listen to him, then he's gonna look and find a new queen to essentially be the queen of the queen of Persia. So Vashti's out, king single, Mordecai is still doing his thing. He has some favor in the area of being around the palace because of his place. Now, where's Esther? How does she come in? So essentially the king's like, all right, well, I'm going to put on a, Love Island of Persia in this time period, essentially. So what he does is Love Island. No, 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 not Love Island. What is it? What is it called? The Bachelorette. So the king decides that he's gonna be the bachelor, and so he finds all these eligible bachelorettes. He finds all these eligible bachelorettes, and essentially brings them into the palace where they're going under the care of. It says here, look. Egyptian woman came to King. See, this is the other name they give him, Ahasuerus. But a lot of people just call him Xerxes. After she had completed 12 months of preparation, that's a year of preparation, according to the regulations for women, for thus were the days of their preparation, up 6 months with oil and myrrh, and 6 months with perfumes and preparations for the beautifying of the women. So they were getting like an extreme makeover, right? Meanwhile, they're getting ready, getting themselves prepared to be in the presence of the king. After she's getting all of her preparations done, we see this verse here that I love so much. And it says, and this is a really, really big key point of the story of Esther. It says, and Esther obtained favor in the sight of all who saw her. Oh, all who saw her. All who saw her. Okay, so not just the king, which it later says here. Esther was taken to the king in his royal palace. And the king loved Esther more than all the other women, and she obtained grace and favor in his sight more than all the other virgins. So he set a royal crown upon her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. But it wasn't just him. She found favor with everyone who saw her, everyone from the beginning, everyone from all the women that she was around, all the women that were taking care of her during this time, I'm assuming. Whoever it was that laid eyes on her had favor. And keep that in mind, that word favor. Keep it in your head. Keep it tucked away for later. King Xerxes, homeboy's obsessed, okay? He could not be more obsessed. He takes a look at her and he's like, oh my gosh. Obviously, he's already appointed her queen. It's an amazing thing. We're celebrating. It's amazing. It's wonderful. Now, keep in mind, he still does not know who she actually is. He does not know that she is of Jewish descent. He does not know. So during this time, Haman, don't forget his name. Haman's the guy we don't like. We don't like Haman. He comes into the picture because he gets promoted by the king to be the second in command of the entire nation of Persia. So this man is the worst ever. Like the worst ever. Like his ego. He must be a short king or something. I don't know. Let me stop. But he must be like way too. He's a narcissist. He's an egotistic maniac because this man only thinks about himself. This man is psychotic. Okay, let me go into this. He goes out into the nation and he expects every single one of the people to bow down to him. Now, he is not the king, but because he's second in command, he thinks that these people are just going to bow down to him. And Esther's uncle Mordecai is like, oh, I'm not about that. He's like, oh, don't get it twisted here, honey. I'm not bowing down. Now, something about the book of Esther, which is actually really particular to the book of Esther, is that God's name is not mentioned, not even once. His name is not mentioned. He's not really alluded to really that much at all. However, in moments like these where Mordecai's refusing to bow, it reminds me almost of when Daniel was not wanting to bow either. And the reason for that was to honor the Lord and to not make any false idols out of the people that were making him bow down. So that's what it reminded me of here. And I think that's the beauty of this book, that even though God's not specifically mentioned, that his presence is still felt throughout the entire narrative, throughout the entire book. So that's for sure. He didn't bow. He didn't want to bow. And Mordecai, and listen, I'm going to get their names confused. For some reason, I keep getting Haman and Mordecai confused, but they're not the same person. Mordecai is good. Haman is bad. They were either, and double check again, read the Bible, double check. They were either servants or they were a part of like the hierarchy that they were some kind of, they were people within the court, so they were able to have access to the king, essentially. So, crazy enough, when I was watching the VeggieTale movie version of it, they were like the chefs. So they brought him a cake that was poisoned, essentially. Or not poisoned. They brought him a cake, and then they put a piano hanging up on the ceiling, and they dropped it on him. So the people that were conspiring to kill the king were actually within his court enough that they can get access to him. I don't exactly know who they were, but double check for me. Go ahead and let me know in the comments. they were conspiring against him, and because Mordecai was and then he was able to let somebody know, and that way the king was spared. He saves the king's life. Okay, Mordecai saves the king's life by doing this, by having the bravery to say this. So keep that also tucked in your pocket for later, because it's going to resurface in just a little bit. Okay, so can you believe that Haman is so bitter that Mordecai refuses to bow down to him, that he decides that all Jewish people are trash, and that he wants to kill every single one of them? Can you imagine? Can you imagine that? But that's what he does. He decrees that he is going to put an end to the entire Jewish population living in Persia. And he goes to this gullible pushover of a king, and he tells him this, and the king's just like, oh, okay, go for it. You know what? I'm not even sure that he really fully understood what was going on, because later in the book, you realize that he was like shocked that this was even a thing. And it's like, oh, are you that much of a pushover that you don't even know what's going on in your kingdom? You just literally like hear someone talk about it, and then you're just like, oh, let's do it. Let's go for it. I can't even. Now, Haman sends out letters to the entire nation to let them know, listen, y'all are all going to be killed. Okay. Y'all are all going to be killed. And Mordecai gets a hold of these letters, and he starts to weep. He's sobbing his eyes out. He's in the dirt, throwing dirt on his head and wearing sackcloth and all that stuff. He's going through it. Esther, I keep wanting to call her Hadassah because that's actually her name, Hadassah, but they call her Esther because it's more like, I guess it's American sounding. I don't know. Her real name is Hadassah. That's a little, sprinkle. Esther even brings him some things to help him, things to help him in his mourning, like food and things like that, but he refuses to take it. He is distraught. But when he finally gets his senses together, he decides to go to the queen and tell her, listen, Esther, we need to figure out how to end this thing. We have to figure out how to tell the king that you're actually a Jew and that he can spare your people. But then Esther's afraid. This is where I literally like underline this and put the fear next to it. The fear, the biggest, like the issue. This is where the like when you're reading a story and then there's like that part in the story. I love literature, and I love learning about how the Bible is written and like the themes of it. And even in regular novels and things like that, like there's always a climax, there's always an issue, there's always the solution, whatever. It goes into like a little hill. This would be like the main problem. This is why what it kind of hinges on. And I would say the fear of Esther throughout this thing is, let me read it to you. This is Esther 3 verse 11. All the king's servants, all the king's horses, and all the king's men. No, let me stop. All the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that any man or woman who goes into the inner court of the king who has not been called first, he has but one law: put all to death, except the one that whom the king holds out this golden scepter, that he may live. Yet I myself have not been called to go into the king these 30 days. So essentially, if you're watching me on YouTube, I'm holding like a makeup brush. What's new? I'm always holding a makeup brush. Essentially, he's got this golden scepter, right? It's literally like this, but it's golden, and it's got like a round thing on the end. And if he holds it out to you, you are allowed to go into his inner courts. But if he does not, then you are all to die. So he's not really about like walk-ins. He doesn't like walk-ins. He needs to invite you. You need to be invited. You need to be accepted to come into his royal inner courts, essentially. And this is the fear, right? Because this is risking life and death at this point. And so if you read further down, you can see that Mordecai tells her, do you not think in your heart that you will escape in the king's palace any more than all the other Jews? So he's essentially telling her, out of everyone, and the entire population, out of anyone amongst the Jews, the people that are living in this nation that are being sentenced to death, if he finds out that you're a Jew, don't you think that you would have more favor than any of the other Jews? You're his literal wife. You are his queen. He is obsessed with you. Don't you think that you're gonna have more of an in than anybody else? And then he says this, this is so, it's so good. I love this. He says, For if you remain completely silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place. But you and your father's house will perish. Yet who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Other versions have said, "For you were born for such a time as this," and I actually have that written on one of my whatchamacallit? One of my curtains for the shower. Actually, it says, "You were born for such a time as this." Anyway, one of my favorite verses in the entire Bible, right there.
Okay, well, hi, welcome back. Sorry about that. My storage was full, so I just offloaded a bunch of like my apps, I guess, from I don't know. Hello, welcome back. I don't even remember where I left off. I think I was at the part where Haman's not bowing down, the Jews are getting killed, and I read about the fact that here we go. You have come to the kingdom for such a time as this, period. So at this point, Esther's like, all right, and this is another, I guess, point that you can add, even though God wasn't mentioned. She told them to fast, to pray for 3 days without food or water for her, and she was going to do the same. So she wanted everyone to do that. And then she says this, which is so iconic. She says, if I perish, I perish. She said, you know what? I know that there's a likelihood that I will die, but if I have to die for my people, then I will die for my people. If I die, I die. Oof, that's so good. And you know what? This is only one of the women there's so many other women in the Bible who have done such iconic things, but this is definitely one of them. So at this point, she's made up her mind, okay? She's made up her mind. She's like, I'm going to tell him that I'm a Jew. I'm going to tell him that I'm a Jew. I'm going to tell him to save my people. I have to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to devise a plan and I'm going to do it. So Esther gets the courage to go outside and stand in front of his courts and wait for the king to extend his scepter. And now she is shaking. She is quaking in her boots, but she is standing outside of his temple, I guess you could call it. I don't know. And she's standing there and she's waiting. And then, hold on. So it says here in the Bible in, chapter 5, verse 2, so it was then when the king saw the queen Esther standing in the court that she found favor again in his sight. And the king held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. Then Esther went near and touched the top of the scepter. And the king said, what do you wish, Queen Esther? What is your request? It shall be given to you, up to half my kingdom. That's the favor that we're talking about here. He extends his golden scepter to her, and she comes in and says, if it pleases the king, would you have a banquet with me? She doesn't tell him in that moment exactly why she's there, if you notice. She establishes a plan to get him to like soften up a little bit. So then is when the first invitation to the dinner comes, where she invites King Mordecai and herself to go to a banquet that she prepared for them. So essentially the first night goes like this. You know, she made her little banquet. She did her little thing. She says, hey, King, what's up? I have something to ask of you. I have a favor to ask of you. And so he's like, and Haman's like, oh, what is it? What is the favor that you have for me? And she says, I would love it if you guys came to another dinner that I'm going to put on tomorrow night. And they're like, oh, okay, sure. Let's do that. Let's go ahead and let's do that. We're going to have another banquet tomorrow. No big deal. So they get ready to leave. They go, whatever. Haman now is met face to face with Mordecai once again. And again, Mordecai is like, ain't no way I'm bowing down. Ain't no way I'm bowing down. It's not going to happen. Now, Haman bites his tongue for the most part. However, he devises a plan to set up a 10-foot wooden beam into the ground to impale him on it like a shish kebab. Okay? This man wants Mordecai dead. He wants him dead. To the point where they actually built it. He didn't just devise this plan. No, he went and he asked servants to build him a 10-foot wooden beam stuck into the ground so that he could impale Mordecai into. Now, Everyone goes to sleep, la-di-da-di-da, except the king, who is unable to rest. So he's tossing and he's turning and he's counting sheep and he cannot fall asleep. So he calls in one of his, servants to read him a bedtime story, essentially. And during this time, as he's trying to doze off, this memory comes into his head. And I don't know if a lot of you have had the same thing happen to you where you're trying to fall asleep and then all of a sudden you have like this list of things that you have to do, or you remember something that happened like 2 weeks ago. You know what I mean? Like you're like, oh my gosh, I just remembered that my friend texted me 2 weeks ago and I left them on red. And then for some reason, then you whip out your phone and you're like, oh my gosh, my bad. I didn't text you back. And I just remembered to text you back. Like that was the moment that he had. He woke up and he was like, oh my gosh, Mordecai saved my life. Like those two guys were trying to kill me and he saved my life. What did I do for him? Absolutely nothing. I did nothing for him. I need to do something for him. So he finally falls asleep. And as soon as he wakes up, he calls Haman. And he says, Haman, now Haman, what would you do? Now this part is hilarious. And when I read this part in the book, I was like, oh my God. I was like, oh, like I was biting my tongue. I was screaming. I was deceased. Okay. This man he says, now Haman, what would you do for someone that saved my life? Like, what would you do for someone that honored me in such a way? How would you, take care of them? How would you honor them, right? For someone who is esteemed, who is noble, who is worthy, who is honorable of praise, what would you do for them? What would you do? So Haman, being this arrogant, prideful, egotistical maniac, is like, oh, he's talking about me. Oh, he's talking about me. He's going to do this for me. So Haman comes up with the most elaborate and beautiful thing. He says, oh, you know what I would do for someone who was worthy of honor? I would go around and parade them on a white horse. Yep. And then I would have someone ringing a bell and saying, hear ye, here's the man who is worthy of honor and praise, and shout it across the nation. And I would have him wear your royal robes so that everybody would know that he comes directly from the king. Oh yeah. And I would give him, I would even go as far as to place a royal crest on his head so that everybody knows that this was ordained by the royal king himself. All right. The stage is set. He is ready to go. He is smiling. Then you know what the king says? Okay, he says, Haman, by gosh, I think you're right. Go ahead and bring the horse. Bring the robe. Bring the royal head crest. Yes. And put Mordecai on that horse. Oh my gosh, that's crazy. Mordecai, the guy that was trying to impale yesterday, Mordecai, that's who you want to ride on the horse? I can't even imagine the instant embarrassment. You know when you get that embarrassment that just like starts in your toes and crawls up your entire body, and then all of a sudden it rushes to your face and your whole face is red and your whole body's hot? That's what Haman was going through in this very moment, and to Haman. So guess what? Haman goes around and parades Mordecai around on this horse for the whole day. Okay? And period. And guess what? He goes to his wife and cries his eyes out when he gets home. And he's so embarrassed and so humiliated. He's in mourning. He's grieving. He's like, I cannot believe this happened. But then he says, you know what, wifey? Tomorrow, I'm going to go to a banquet with the queen and the king himself. And even though Mordecai was honored today, I get to sit at the hands and feet of the king and the queen and nobody else, just me. Can you imagine? They must love me so much. Again, with his prideful, egotistical self. I'm just going to be, the most honored and esteemed person in this place. And I don't even feel that bad. So he gets ready to go to the banquet the next day. And now here's where things get messy, okay? because he's sitting, they eat, they have their little feasty feast, they go about their business, and then eventually the subject of why they're even there in the first place comes up. And you know what the king says again, which I didn't mention the first time, but he says, listen, I'll give you anything, babe. I'll give you anything, boo, up to the half of the entire kingdom. Like I will cut my heart out and put it on a platter because I'm obsessed with you and you're everything. And yes, this is what the king says to her. And at this point, she has already had not one, not two, but 3 times to go up to this man and tell him exactly what's going on. Because if you think about it, she could have already gone and told him this the first time that he let her into his courts. She could have told him in that moment, hey, I'm a Jew and this man is trying to kill all the Jews and you let it happen and please put an end to this. But she didn't. She waited. And then she waited again, right? Because she had the banquet for the first time. And she could have told him there again, but she didn't. And now she has an opportunity and a chance to do it one last time. So she says, so the king says, what is your petition? It shall be granted to you. And what is your request? Up to half the kingdom? It shall be done. Then Queen Esther answered and said, if I have found favor in your sight, O king, and if it pleases the king, let my life be given to me at my petition, and my people at my request. For we have been sold, my people and I, to be destroyed, to be killed, and to be annihilated. So King Xerxes answered to the queen, who is he? Where is he? Who would dare presume in his heart to do such a thing? So she points out Haman and she says, you wicked adversary and enemy. You did this to my people. Now, when the king hears about this, he's shocked, okay? He's so shocked and so offended, even though he kind of let it happen, not gonna lie. But that he decides to impale him on the same wooden beam that Haman made for Mordecai. Now, Esther has to go before him yet again and say, okay, well, great, now Haman is dead, but what about all the people that are gonna die in the upcoming month? All the people that are under the decree that was passed out a little while ago. And he said, now, my love, I can't undo it. I can't undo it. Once I decide that I'm going to do something, once my seal, my signet ring is on it, nobody can revoke it. Not even me. You know, like it went through like a whole system, and once it's done, it's done. So they devise a plan. Like, what are they going to do? How are we going to put an end to this? Her and Mordecai and the king decide that they're going to go ahead and release papers to let all of the Jewish people know that they are going to be given the opportunity to defend themselves against any of the people who are coming against them on that day. And now you could probably think, well, okay, but there's going to be casualties, like people are still going to die. But then I was thinking about that and I thought, you know what? It's better that they were able to, that kind of sounds terrible, but it's true. It was better that they were able to kill off the people who were hating and trying to end them. You know what I mean? Like, if it was better that they had the opportunity to destroy the people who were trying to destroy them, because then they could live in peace. Does that make sense? Because if you're walking around and your neighbor is trying to kill you, and they finally have the opportunity to kill you based off of a decree that was placed by the king, wouldn't you want the opportunity to defend yourself against them rather than just them live amongst you in this passive in this passive silence? So honestly, that eats. And guess what? The Jewish people ended up overtaking the people who were out to get them. And they had a victory and they had a celebration and they commemorated that day for years and years to come afterward. All because Esther was at the right place at the right time, had favor in the eyes of the king, had favor in everybody else's eye. Mordecai, who also had favor, right? And guess what? Something that I didn't mention, because Mordecai was so involved throughout the entire process, he was elevated to be the second in command where Haman was. And then you know what else? Something crazy and super savage. I actually wrote in my Bible that was savage. Esther decides that she wants to go ahead and have Haman's family impaled and killed in front of everyone for the whole world to see, which is kind of crazy if you think about it, but also kind of hilarious, because the very poles that were meant to kill Mordecai were the very poles that were used to kill Haman and his entire family. And that just goes to show what the enemy meant for evil, God meant for good. That's just one of the themes throughout this entire story. One of the main points that, again, I was wanting to mention and to really drive home was favor. The fact that Esther's and Mordecai's lives were just kind of like, everything was happening, everything was going on, everything was just like next. Like, no, the king didn't know that Esther was Mordecai's niece, right? The king didn't know that the very man who second in command, Haman, didn't know he was going to be impaled. It all was just God's hand on it, God's favor on Esther. Do you know when Pharaoh's heart was hardened and he didn't let the people go? It's kind of like, it's similar to that, you know what I mean? And in the same way, I just want to drive this home. I want to drive this home because it's a thought that I can't get out of my head. I was reading in the Bible, and one of the things that I found to be just mind-blowing and gave me just probably one of the biggest senses of peace in my life would be this. Okay, this is a different way how I can describe it. You know how, like, you go about your life and you might be a beautiful person with a beautiful heart, but people just don't see it until you meet, like, the person that you're supposed to be with, and then they can see everything that you didn't see. But it was because they had the heart and there was favor in that situation. Does that make sense? The king saw Esther and was obsessed with her because she had favor over her life. It's like a special touch that the Lord places on her life, where not only the king, but everyone who's surrounding her can see that there's something on her, like a mantle of favor that is on her and on her life, right? It's favor. In the same way, which is crazy to me, but I was reading in John, and the example that's given is kind of the opposite of what I'm even going to mention here, because essentially, if you read in the book of John and even all the gospels, you can see, like, the trajectory of what led Jesus to the cross, and now Jesus was fully human and fully man. So he was able to, kind of, see the things that were going to come, but he didn't put a stop to it. Why? Because he was in God's will, right? He was in God's will. So that meant that he had to follow whatever the Father's will was over his life. You know what I'm saying? And everything had to happen the way that it had to happen. For him to be dead on a cross to then resurrect and save the entire world. And crazily enough, when I was reading Esther, I was brought back to that because I was reminded that everything that happened in Esther's life, everything that happened in Mordecai's life, right, led back to them being saved. Her household, her family, her nation was saved because of all of the things that happened, all of the events that happened, because it was in God's will, the Father's will, for that to happen, for the Jewish people to be restored. Do you see how it all just kind of connects? And then they were saved through Esther, essentially. And it just, like, okay, and the example of Jesus dying on the cross, couldn't you see how that would be considered different than Esther being promoted and exalted, right? Couldn't you see the difference there? And even with the story of Moses, where he delivers the people out of Egypt despite the Pharaoh's heart being hardened, right? His heart was hardened. There was no favor there. However, that had to happen for the Exodus to happen. What I'm trying to get at was, if God the Father is in control of everything that goes on, whether it looks positive or negative, for the end of the story to take place, for the freedom at the end to take place, all of these things, hear me, all of these things are connected to freedom, right? In the story of Moses, the freedom is at the very end, where the people leave Egypt and are no longer in slavery. Are no longer in slavery and get to escape and eventually lead themselves to the promised land, as well as the story of Esther, where her people are in exile in a place that they have to hide their identity. Esther had to hide her identity, but through her story, through the divine push that is going on throughout all of this entire story. She was able to take part in the liberation of her people. In the same way as Jesus followed the will of the Father, he was able to, this is so good. Jesus was able to follow the will of the Father and lead his people to eternal salvation and freedom. Do you see how it all connects? It all connects, even if the initial interpretation may seem negative or positive. It doesn't matter, because God's will and plan is always the same. Now, Jesus had a deeper reflection on what that actually meant, right? Because maybe Esther or Moses, maybe they did, maybe they didn't see the divinity that was happening amongst all of it. You know what I mean? Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. They did make the right choice for the most part, right? But Jesus, being a perfect, fully human and fully God, human that he was, knew that he was going to end up in death and still chose to die. You know, he still chose to die. And now we are not gifted that ability to see what is to come. We do not have, well, the more we spend time with the Lord, of course, we're going to reflect him more, but we do not have the opportunity to be exactly in the same position that Jesus was, where he was able to see exactly what was to come. He was able to peek into what the future looked like and still decide to do it anyway, to still go through with it anyway. But these people, right, in that moment where Mordecai is sitting and he's telling her, you know what, if you don't do it, someone else is going to have to do it. But if you don't do it now, your family's going to die. You're going to see it with your own eyes. Your family's, if you don't do it now, then whatever happens next is partially in your hands, which is a lot of pressure. But listen, she was obedient to the will of the Father for her people, for her nation to be saved. Do you see what I'm saying? Even in the midst of a life or death situation, this was not any, like, if we can go back, we know that the king had already established that a woman's place was not above the husband's place, as we initially established at the beginning of this word. At the beginning of Esther, we see that she is in a place of oppression to who she is, right? As a woman, as someone who is coming in at the end of the story. And we see that Esther is able, with the favor of God, by the will of the Father, to speak up for herself and save her nation. And that is able to let Mordecai then, right? Because Mordecai is still in the story. That is able to let Mordecai, a Jew, be able to be second in command among all of the people. Do you see? Do you see how God turned something that the enemy meant for evil into something meant for good? This is a literal explanation of that literal. Let me see what verse that is. Ooh, okay. This comes from Genesis 50 verse 20 that says, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." This is another example. This is another example of the exact same thing that I'm trying to reiterate here, of the fact that God's hand being in your life is what's gonna eventually lead to freedom. You know what I mean? The obedience to the call, the obedience to the hard thing. You know what I mean? The obedience to God's will, even though it looks hard and it's scary and it's rough, right? That's what's gonna lead us to the freedom at the end. Guys, I'm talking too much. And I can be passionate sometimes, but what I want you to gain from this, and this is something I meant to mention at the beginning of the podcast, but I often, like, I know that podcasts are more for like problem solving, I guess, like if you're dealing with depression, or if you're dealing with like relationship issues, or if you're dealing with something specific, then you go to a podcast and you listen to it and you kind of like get some knowledge off of that. And that's great. But I maybe I'm approaching this in a more of like a sermon teaching type of way, because there's more than one thing going on here in the book of Esther. You know what I mean? And I if you like this, please let me know. If you like kind of diving into these Bible stories, please like let me know in the comments so I can do more of these as podcasts, rather than like issue solution based podcasts. You know, like I was gonna do one the other day about working out, but then I was like, okay, but That doesn't excite me as much as this. You know, like, I understand that people have issues that need to be solved, and that can sometimes be at the forefront of our minds. But when we dive into a story in the Bible, we get multiple glimpses of others' lives that God used, and their issues and their problems, and how it was all overcome in the end. And then we'll leave gaining a knowledge about something that we didn't have before, but we'll also gain the solution to our problem anyway. It's just already in there. I hope that makes sense. But what I want to leave you with, after you read the book, please let me know if you read it. Trust in God. I trust in God, my Savior, the one who will never fail. My favorite thing to do is sing badly on these podcasts, I guess. Trust in God, bro. You know, being so for real about something that I have recently learned, that I just, if right, you have not because you ask not. And I have recently learned to put myself in positions where I have to ask, and I have to advocate, and I have to make myself heard, because if I don't, then I will be sorry that I didn't, right? And I have been, by God's grace, given that God confidence to start to just be in positions where I could be rejected, where I could be hurt, where things could go badly, just like in the same instance that Esther is speaking about, right? Things could go badly, but she's still in faith, going in and doing what she has to do for the outcome that is necessary, right? I've been putting myself in those situations, and a lot of the times it works out, but a lot of the times it doesn't. But hear me. It's all gonna work out in the end. It's all gonna work out in the end. You know, when Jesus died on that cross, it was a point of suffering and mourning, but it all worked out, thank God, in the end. And when you know, the Israelites went through all those things with Pharaoh, who hardened his heart, and then the plagues came, and it was torturous. At the very end of the day, it was all worth it. You see where I'm heading at here? And that, to me, is a perspective shift right there that can let me know that even in the moments where it doesn't seem like the favor is on my life, could it be that the favor is still there? Could it be that the favor never leaves? Could it be that if you don't get the job, that's favor too? Could it be that if you don't end up with that person in that relationship, that's favor also? Could it mean that there's freedom at the end, right? If you're obedient, if you're following the commands of God, if you're trying your best, reading your word, being disciplined, and things don't work out, couldn't that just be God's hand in the midst of it? You know? Do it. You know, unafraid. Step into your calling, step into your purpose, because there's so many things attached to that. It's not just freedom for you, you know. It's freedom for everyone attached to you. For your children, for your spouse, whatever. There's freedom there. I'll leave you with this. Be open. Be open. Be open. If you're obedient, if you're trying to follow God's will in your life, be open to saying yes. You know, be willing to be used. And God can use someone else. He can, just like Mordecai said. But you are here now for such a time as this. You are at your job right now for such a time as this. You are at your school for such a time as this. You are with who you're with for such a time. You are on this earth for such a time as this. Could it be you? Yeah. Esther was just a regular girl. Could it be you? 1000%. So be open. Open up your heart to whatever the Lord has you to do, and do it afraid. Even if you're afraid. I'm sure Esther was afraid going in on that first time, that second time, that third time. I'm sure she was having a couple sleepless nights. I would be. But she had to do what she had to do, and she had favor to the end. Esther 9:22 says, as these days on which the Jews got relief from their enemies, and as the month that had been turned for them from sorrow into gladness, from mourning into joy. Who knows? If you're struggling with, this is a big scale thing, but even if it's small, even if it's something that's attached to your depression and your anxiety, if God's telling you to be obedient in this thing, could it just mean freedom in that area, in your mental health, in your relationships? Couldn't it just mean something small too? To turn your mourning into joy. Let me pray with you, and then I'll let you go on your way. And if you're listening to this near Thanksgiving, happy Thanksgiving. Be grateful that God is doing so much in your life. What's meant to happen will happen, and what is not in your hands. It's in His. Father God, I thank you that whoever is listening to this podcast can just be empowered, uplifted, that they can just feel that whatever it is that you call them to do, that you will give them the ability to go through with it. I pray favor over their lives. I pray that favor over the relationships in their jobs and their schools and wherever they are. I pray that your hand will be upon them, and that they can see it even more so, even in their fear, even in their depression. Maybe be like Esther. May we say yes to the call no matter what happens. May we be bold, and may we trust in you. In Jesus' name. Now, really quickly before you leave, because my storage is yelling at me, screaming at me, let's pray a prayer of salvation, because once you accept the Lord into your heart, then you are in the family, and you are my brother and my sister, and let's do it. Father God, I thank you so much for the lives of those listening to my voice right now. I pray that if they are willing to accept you as their Lord and Savior, that they may repeat after me and say this. Father God, thank you that even though I was a sinner, you died for me, and you gave me a free gift of salvation through Jesus Christ. Through Jesus Christ, who died on the cross for my sins. I am no longer a slave to my sins, but I am free through your blood, Jesus Christ. May the Holy Spirit, who is a counselor, counsel me throughout the days of my life to help me be more and more like you, Jesus. And may you stay with me all the days of my life. Amen.